Hey, what's up? This is Nick with Ultimate Motorcycling, and today I just got done riding something truly exciting. This is the brand new 2022 Aprilia Tuareg 660. Now, you guys know that Aprilia has some history in the ADV and off-road segment. The Tuareg name dates back to the 80s, and they did a lot of awesome racing in Dakar and other rallies of that nature. They also had the Picasso and some other adventure bikes along the way, but it's been quite some time since the Nawale-based brand has jumped back in the ADV market, and there's no better time than now. Now, the segment has been growing, and we'll actually just say bursting at the seams in the past few years with popularity for the big bikes, and now, more importantly, the middleweight bikes, and that is exactly what the Tuareg 660 does. So, the genesis of this motorcycle is that it is a extension of the 660 parallel twin line. You guys know this from the Tuono 660 and the RS 660, and that parallel twin is, the basis for this motorcycle. Of course, there are some crucial changes, and those sneaky Aprilia engineers knew that this bike was coming out of the gate since day one of development of this awesome little power plant. So there are some really cool things in there as far as allowing this engine to work in an off-road oriented chassis. So, street bike design isn't going to work with, off-road geometry. So they allowed the swing arm pivot point and where it actually mounts to be mounted much higher, so they get a steeper swing arm angle. But that's just some of the facts we're going to get into in a minute. Now, I'm here in Sardinia, and we just got done riding today, and we're going to get into this first ride view, and I hope you guys stick around. Now, the first thing I want to talk about today is, of course, that 659 parallel twin engine. It's just a peach of a power plant, and some of the new things that they did for the Tuareg. There are some fundamental changes to make it more off-road oriented. Of course, right off the top, if you look at the spec sheet, you're going to see a tune that is more torque oriented. So to that end, claimed horsepower figures are 80 horsepower, and then you have 51 foot-pounds of torque, and that is a little bit lower than the RS 660. Now, importantly, they've also gone to a quick clean air filter, which is up here, and a new airbox, obviously, for this platform. It also has a new camshaft as well, new exhaust system, new oil pan, because they need additional ground clearance, and per the claimed numbers, you're looking at just shy of 10 inches, so ample ground clearance, right in line with the T7 and KTM Adventure R. And when we're actually out on the street riding the bike, this engine's got a lot of good low-end torque, and importantly, it comes in nice and soft, so it's a very tractable, progressive engine, and it builds into that power, into that sort of exciting mid-range that when you're on the road, that really helps. You can just get off the apex and have some fun in the twisty bits, and it is very friendly down low, so you can spin up the rear off-road, and you won't get into too much trouble. And then, of course, you have some top ends that fades way up in the hinterlands of the RPMs, but all around, it's a solid engine and something that's really fun. Another off-road oriented change is shortened gearing. Aprilia engineers shortened the first gear and also shortened the final drive gearing significantly, which has given the engine a bit more pep in its step off the line. Back to the chassis that I mentioned earlier, you do get fully adjustable suspension all the way around. You have a 43 millimeter fork up here, fully adjustable, and then you have a shock fully adjustable back here. We did some light off-roading today. I would say, just your typical fire road, things like that. Pretty rocky because you're on a Mediterranean island. But overall, I think the suspension does pretty well in an off-road situation, especially for someone of my skill level that isn't necessarily the greatest off-road rider. I can definitely hang, but really I think the way it's damped and its spring rates does quite well. Now, in a road context, that's where I think the Tuareg 660 is going to be kind of the star of the show for the middleweight ADV class. I think you can ride this thing more relative to a supermoto. You can get on the front end and just really pile on the brakes, trust the front end, despite the fact that it's a 21-inch wheel. Again, off-road oriented. You ride it like a supermoto. You do have long travel suspension, so that's something to the tune of 240 millimeters, if I recall the spec sheet right. So you do have a little pitch, vice versa. And it's very supermoto-esque, and you can tell that a street bike company like Aprilia really built this thing and put a lot of care into the way it handles. So on the street, this thing is absolutely excellent. And off-road, it's really stable, it doesn't deflect, and I had a lot of fun. Now, obviously, we got to get it back to Southern California and put it through some more paces and some more hardcore off-roading, I guess we should say. But, I was really pleased with it there. Now, another thing that I think people will be interested in is that fact that the seat and the fuel tank itself, which is right here, actually extends all this way, calling back to the original Tuareg. It's really narrow. So on the spec sheet, they say something like 33.8 inches, and that's a pretty tall seat height, no matter how you shake and bake it. But the bike is super narrow, and I can actually get my 32-inch inseam on the ground. And I really can't do that on most adventure bikes. They're pretty tall. You need to be kind of a lanky guy or gal to make it happen. As far as that stuff goes, those are the positives. I really enjoyed that. Not everything is peaches and cream. There are a couple little hiccups here and there. You get a lot more heat from the radiant heat, I should say, from this application than, say, the Tuono 660 or the RS 660. So that was a little bit, but it's a chilly day, so I enjoyed that. But in the summer, probably not going to be that cool. And, the electronics package is extremely competent. That's going to be your main thing above the Yamaha Tenere 700. In terms of rider aids, we're working with 2-level ABS and 4 levels of traction control. ABS never cuts in prematurely on the street and allows for aggressive braking when riding off-road. Traction control works equally as well and allows for nice slides, especially in the lower settings, and still propels you forward over rocky conditions. We should note that the Tuareg does not use an IMU, meaning that we don't have access to cornering ABS or lean angle sensitive traction control. That said, the rider aids do work quite well. You have an urban mode, an explorer mode, an individual mode, and then an off-road mode. And 2 of those are preset. The other one you can fully customize. And in off-road mode, it disables ABS in the rear, and you can disable ABS in the front completely should you choose to do that. Now, if you key on and off, it will reset, so you have to do it again. I really enjoyed those modes. I think the Explorer mode is just perfect for the street. It's not overly sporty, and it's just, perky enough. And the off-road map works really well in bouncy situations. On the street, it actually can be a little snatchy, just kind of up there. But, is what it is. Overall, I think Aprilia has done an extremely good job with this bike. It handles really well. Like I mentioned before on the street, it just tips into corners gently, or you can start hucking around like a supermoto and having a lot of fun. And that's something that, I think people are going to be into. But with Aprilia's goals for this bike, they did want something that was going to be competent on the street and touring oriented, but off-road capable, not just capable, but really, adept in doing that without going too far. So, there are other touring-oriented aspects to this motorcycle, like it has cruise control that's standard. You can add a quick shifter, up-down quick shifter for $200. And the subframe, which is welded in place, and I know off-road guys aren't going to be too stoked on that. It is welded in place for 2 specific reasons. One, it makes the chassis significantly stiffer, and 2, it also ups the carrying capacity significantly, and it allows people to carry luggage, passengers, and gear for camping and stuff like that all day long. One of the last things I really want to wrap up with is just kind of how cool the chassis is with this motorcycle. There's a lot of feedback, a lot of positive feedback in this steel frame. And, that's a new swing arm. It is not derived from the RS660 or the Tuono. And importantly, it's a less stiff swing arm, as you might imagine, because this is an off-road oriented motorcycle. And that was something that was really important for the designers to help feedback and help chassis flex as you bounce around on the trails. But again, this thing handles brilliantly, and that's one of the really standout features. And the last thing I kind of want to touch on are the brakes. They went with a axial rotor and or an axial caliper setup instead of a radial setup for a number of reasons. One, it's cheaper, so it keeps that MSRP down. 2, they didn't want as an aggressive bite, and running an axial setup is actually lighter, so that's going you know, going back to the weight component. Now you do get a significant fuel range, and it still comes in at a claimed 449 pounds. Brake feel overall is, I would say it's pretty progressive. It has a soft initial bite, so it just doesn't have the attack of radial calipers, but you know, I'm a fan of them. Maybe some other people won't be. Your prerogative. Now, just to wrap things up, you know, I think for the base price of $11,999, Aprilia has put out an extremely competitive motorcycle. When you look at its direct competition, you know, the Yamaha Tenere 700 and of course the KTM Adventure 890 Adventure lineup, you know, it's extremely adept at riding on road, and I had a blast riding it off-road. So I can't wait to get this thing back to California and see how it does against the competition. But, you know, I think it's going to do pretty well. You know, this is Nick with Ultimate Motorcycling. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and drop them down below. And the last thing I want to remind you guys, go ahead and take care. So, later on.